All right, we're ready.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us for this brief reviewer training. I'm Joan Dickinson, and I am the Director of Scholarship for IDEC, and I essentially oversee the scholarship collaborative through IDEC.
My name is Amanda Gale, and I'm the IDEC Abstract Review Coordinator. So there's actually two of us, but right now I'm going to take the lead and coordinating all of the reviews for this year's IDEC conference in Charlotte.
My name is Cynthia Garcia, and I'm the IDEC Member Services Manager.
So this is the overview of the training content that we're going to cover in what will hopefully be a very brief review. So we're going to discuss the process of reviewing, including key dates, reviewing the content for identifying information, as that was an issue and has been an ongoing issue in some of the conferences. And we're also going to go over the rubric as it's changed slightly, and we'll go ahead and explain all of those components as you're seeing them.
We will also go over the process of recusals with you, and also if there's any potential conflicts of interest. And we will also discuss the importance of leaving comments when you're reviewing the abstracts. And this is a new requirement this year. And we're also hoping that we can provide you with information on who you should contact if you have any questions. And also we hope that this brief reviewer training will make you feel more comfortable with the review process.
And then lastly, there's quite a few people who are new reviewers and several other who are returning, and hopefully this is going to be a good review for those people who have done it in the past several times, as we are changing the process a little bit. So speaking of process, you should be receiving email notification from Omni through IDEC that will provide instructions on accessing your review assignment. And that should happen on or near September 21st, as long as there isn't any inclemental weather that pushes the deadline back. You should be receiving anywhere between 10 and 15 abstracts. The number is going to be dependent on how many people submit. So it may be on the lower side or it may be on the higher side. But that's always going to depend on the number of submissions.
Also, our goal this year is to assign the abstracts based on your area of expertise that you have identified. At this point, we basically have 54 reviewers. We are hopeful that we will be able to increase that number. But at this point, we do have 54. The other thing is that you will basically receive a reminder email about 2 weeks, and then also 1 week before the deadline that the abstracts are due.
And I'll be sending that to everyone just so you are familiar with my email address.
I will send you any information in regard to your login. If you submit to the abstract site, you'll notice that the judging portal kind of looks the same. It is, however, a different login. So just keep an email out from me for that information as well.
So Cynthia, you will be emailing them the login and password to get into their reviews.
That is correct.
Perfect. So November 9th is the deadline that we are hoping to receive all of the reviews back. And that will help us or give us a little bit of time to see if there's any issues before sending out an email letting people know whether they've been accepted or rejected for conference. So identifying information is frequently an issue, and it's best to kind of, before you start reviewing it, to just go ahead and look at it. So you're not filling out the rubric, which can take a little bit of time. So just go ahead first and read through the abstract initially, looking for author or institution names. So for example, if someone said, North Carolina State University faculty from the Interior Design Department are conducting design studio courses, that would be unacceptable, right? Because they've identified not only the university, but their department as well. So what would be okay is if somebody said that they were conducting a post-occupancy evaluation on a LEED Platinum residence hall at North Carolina State University. This doesn't mean that the faculty at North Carolina State University conducted the study. They just picked their site based on LEED Platinum information at that specific university. So again, anytime they state their name or they state their university that they collected the study at, that would be an issue. Checking the appendix for identifying information is also someplace that you might want to look at, as this is also often found there.
And what we find is that typically the identifying information typically occurs in the SOTL abstracts. So when you're working on when you're examining the SOTL abstract, a lot of times you'll see that identifying information in the appendix. If you do find identifying information, then please contact Cynthia at IDEC. It's really important that you contact her. Do not recuse yourself. Please contact her first. The other way that you might see identifying information is also in the file name. Sometimes the author will use their last name in the file name, and that's also not acceptable.
So when you, if you do find any information and realize that you need to recuse yourself, don't start reviewing the abstract. What we ask is that you just obviously contact me and let me know why you're recusing yourself, but also include the abstract number. Once we have that information, IDEC will send out a separate notification letting them know that that their submission has had identifying information.
Okay, so there are two different rubrics for the abstracts. And so we have a rubric for the SOTL, which is a Scholarship of Teaching and Learning abstracts. And then we have a rubric for the Scholarship of Design Research, which is the SODR abstracts. Both of these rubrics have been revised. They both have 6 sections, but what you'll notice is that the information under the sections is a little bit different and relates more closely to whether the abstract is an SOTL abstract or an SODR abstract.
So we're going to talk about both rubrics and explain those 6 sections in the following slides. But just keep in mind that there's only 500 words, or roughly 4,000 characters, and 5 references that can be included within the submission. So it's not a paper. So you need enough. So you just need to keep that in mind as you're reviewing it, that it's roughly 500 words.
Okay, so the first we're going to look at the SOTL rubric, and the first category on the rubric is relevance. And so when you're reading the abstract, note the relevancy to interior design education. Is the issue timely? Is the issue current? Is it innovative? Is the issue significant and important to the field of interior design? One thing I think that's important to note is the topic does not need to tie into the conference theme to be relevant. I think another thing to point out here is that notice how you're seeing a reference that's given with the example of a statement that relates to relevance. We also ask you to look at the teaching issue and problem. And so here, you should be looking to see if the writer has really rationalized or justified the teaching issue and problem. The issue or problem should be identified and it should be clear. And this could appear as a purpose statement or perhaps a goals statement. And so on this slide, we're just showing you sort of two examples of a teaching issue and a problem, and also relevancy. And these are actually pulled from abstracts that were accepted to conference in the past.
So the next section is context. Context should provide necessary background information to set up the scholarship. So identifying precedents related to the teaching issue or problem might be a technique. Typically, if there are no references or citations within the abstract, there's likely not much context provided. So keep that in mind as you are reviewing it. And remember, it is a score where 5 is the top, and I believe 0 is the lowest. So there could be a range. But again, this is another example that was provided from an abstract that was accepted.
So the next category is methods, and we're looking here, again, remember we're looking at the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning abstract. So here we're looking at instructional methods. And so the methods should be written so that we can clearly understand the teaching strategies used. And they really should be written in a way so that we could repeat these strategies if we wanted to. And I always like to think of the methods as the instructions or blueprint of the project or teaching strategy. And then another category you'll examine is teaching and learning outcomes. And so what we're looking at here is these outcomes should tie back to the purpose or goal of the teaching scholarship. And the teaching outcomes should also relate to the instructional methods that are used. And you also want to look at, are these purely anecdotal, or again, do they relate back to the context that was cited? And do they relate back to the instructional methods? So if we kind of look at the first, we have an example again pulled from an abstract of the instructional methods. And here you see that we're saying weekly meetings with designers and research strategists from 4 influential retail agencies provided students with collaborative ideation, interactive workshops, and project feedback. One firm hosted a gallery-style midterm review. So what's good about this is, first of all, we know that we're dealing with research strategists from 4 retail agencies that provided the students with this feedback. And again, this is written in a way that kind of provides a blueprint of the instructional methods that were used.
So the last section is significance of the presentation. So this is what we like to think of as the so what, why does it matter part. It might help you think about, it might help you as you're reviewing to think about if this is original, if it's a creative approach, or if this is something that can advance student learning. This presentation category, just keep this in mind, Scholarship of Teaching and Learning does require an appendix. So the appendix may add clarity to the significance, the outcome, or the method section. So just make sure that you're looking at all of the submission material as you're going through the rubric. So Joan, is there anything else you want to talk about with Scholarship of Teaching and Learning before we move on to Scholarship of Design Research?
I think that's about, I think that's it.
Okay. So Scholarship of Design Research also has 6 sections, which Joan already talked about, and the first one is relevance. So things to think about when you're reviewing this or you're reading through the abstract is the issue important to the field of interior design, again, or interior architecture? The topic does not need to tie into the conference theme to be relevant, so keep that in mind as well. And again, there is a, a citation here that relates it back to the literature as well. And these examples, again, were pulled from not just abstracts that were accepted to conference, but they were pulled from the top 5 from the last 2 years. So highly scored abstracts. When you're thinking about the problem, this can be in the form of objectives, research questions, or the purpose of the study, but the authors need to rationalize and to justify the problem. So to put it into the bigger picture, what are they trying to answer?
Okay, so for the context for the Scholarship of Design Research, you want to look to see if the author has identified the gaps in the literature and the body of knowledge. And so when you're reviewing this category, you want to see if the context is written as a persuasive argument on why the study is important to the field of interior design or the field of interior design education. Again, if there are no references, then there is basically no context. And so that's definitely something to also look at. You know, make sure that the author has used references. And I always typically look to see how current the references are. The other, I think, aspect to examine as you're reviewing is that the variables that are mentioned in the purpose or the research questions or the objective, those should be discussed in the context as well. And again, we are showing you examples of context that's been pulled from previous abstracts. And these are abstracts that were scored very highly in the past. And so if we kind of look at the second bullet point, you're going to see here it says, despite these trends, little research has been conducted that evaluates the effectiveness of the cancer treatment environment. So right away, we're seeing a gap in the literature that is identified in this context section. So that's always something important to examine when you're reviewing this category.
And then also 5 references can be included. So keep that in mind as well. If they have 5, but you think they should have a 6, they only have the opportunity to include 5. So looking at methods of investigation, this is basically should be detailed enough so that whether it can be replicated or not, but it at least can be clearly evaluated to determine whether the findings drawn are accurate, right? So duplicating the study would be great. So in this example, you've got the number of items on the survey. It tells you how many participants, so what the sample was. It tells you when the data was collected. It tells you what the instrument was, so it was a questionnaire, and it even tells you the types of questions within the questionnaire. So this is a very good example that would allow somebody to replicate this study. Again, there's only 500 words or roughly 4,000 characters within this abstract, so you might not have all of the information that you feel is really important, but enough information so that you can evaluate the study's findings are the important part. So think of this again, kind of like the blueprint of the study. So outcomes is the 5th section, and this should be reporting findings or results. The call clearly states that the research should be finished. So if there aren't any findings reported, most likely the study hasn't been finished, and then it's not a good case for this presentation format, right? So you really need findings. They could just be key findings. It doesn't need to report all of the findings, but some of the findings need to be reported within the abstract in order for it to be applicable.
So for this, for the significance of the presentation, This is another category that you will review. And what we're looking at here is we're looking to see, does the study advance the body of knowledge for the field of interior design or interior design education? And remember too that the significance really needs to relate back to the literature review or the context section. And again, so here we're basically, again, providing you with two examples that sort of look at, why is this research important? How does it further the field of interior design?
So that's all we were going to talk about for the rubric. Does anybody, Cynthia, Joan, do you have anything else to talk about before we move on?
I think that's it for me.
Okay.
Okay, so now we are kind of looking at when you might recuse yourself and what the process is for recusing. So again, as we kind of mentioned before, please contact Cynthia before you recuse. But first of all, if you saw this presentation at regional, and if it's essentially the same abstract and same presentation that you saw at the regional conference, then please notify Cynthia, because the abstract will then be disqualified. Also, if you see the abstract and it's been submitted in two categories, so for example, if the abstract was submitted as a presentation and then the exact same abstract was also submitted as a poster, that would also be another situation where the abstract would be disqualified and it would be a recusal. But again, please contact Cynthia.
If during the process you realize that you know the author based on the abstract, then I do ask that you email me as soon as possible so that a new reviewer can be assigned to review that submission. I will do my best to not assign you to review something that's been produced in the same university as you are.
And always include the abstract number whenever you're emailing Cynthia for any information, because that will make it much easier for her.
So reviewer comments, this is also, again, a part of both of the SOTL and also on the SODR rubrics. It is critical that you provide the author with comments. This is really important because it really will help the author in terms of perhaps improving their abstract. So, and sometimes your feedback might seem obvious, but it's really probably not obvious to the author. So one strategy that you can use when you're trying to provide comments to the author is you can point out inconsistencies that you might see in the abstract. So on this slide, what we're showing you is some examples of comments that reviewers have left in the past. So for example, you'll see the first one says, the stated problem and the focus on the study don't match up clearly. And that's, again, a good example of where you're seeing inconsistencies within the abstract. So that's definitely one comment that you can provide for the author.
So another strategy when you're writing comments to the author is to use the rubric categories as prompts. So there may be insufficient information in one of the categories within the rubric, and so that's something that you can use to help the author next time if they don't get accepted to revise it to be submitted again. So again, here's some examples that were provided previously. So the last one, for example, nice idea to use exhibition design in the curriculum, but conclusions are we just did this and it was good. So clearly there wasn't enough with conclusions and findings in order to for the reviewer to adequately review that. And so making that more robust would help your abstract in the future. And again, these were all taken from actual reviewer comments for both SOTL and SODR. So another strategy is to think of areas where the abstract could be improved. So looking at the last one again, how data was analyzed needs to be explained further. It's an interesting topic, author needs to proofread. So there were issues with maybe grammar or spelling that needed to be corrected, and so that's an area that can be improved on in the future. So this is new to the reviewing process this year. We're adding an accept or reject button. So before you submit your review, so after you've read through everything, after you've looked to see if there's any identifying information, after you have gone through the rubric and scored, we would just like you to give your opinion as to whether you think the abstract should be accepted or rejected. So accepted to be presented at conference, or it's not a good fit. So any submissions that have conflicting opinions, so if one reviewer says it should be accepted and another one says it should be rejected, there will be a third review for that submission. So our goal is always to have everything reviewed 3 times, but depending on how many abstract submissions we get and how many reviewers we have, that may not be possible, but we will definitely make sure that anything where there is a conflict between accept and reject, that it will receive a third review. Anybody else have any information that we want to share before we end?
I think that's it. But so we just want to thank you for watching this brief training. And just please keep in mind that if you have any questions while you're reviewing the abstracts, that you can certainly contact us, and we would be more than willing to help you out. And again, thanks so much for watching.
Thank you.